Welcome to the Hot Lava Podcast. Kevin Acee, Padres beat writer for the Union-Tribune. There's my boss, Ryan Finley. I'm in Los Angeles. Padres against the Dodgers. It is not the first time they have met. It's the first time they have met in the United States this season. Dodgers are 10-5, the only team with a winning record in the National League West. The Padres are 7-8. Ryan, where would you like to start?
Kevin, I would like to start with what you wrote about in today's paper. And I get what you're trying to say, and I think that it merits more discussion. The Padres are not a 500 baseball team as it stands today, heading into a series against the Dodgers at Dodger Stadium. They have had some up and down moments. For a team that has talked about starting hot, I'm not sure you could say that they've started hot. But scratch beneath the surface, talk to Mike Shilton, some players, and it seems to me, Kevin, like they feel like they're in a really good place and maybe a better place than they were at this time a year ago.
The eye test says that they're a better team. Right. Not the eye test when you look at the standings. And believe me, when I wrote it, it felt a little, weird based on having lived through last season and all the "we'll be okay," the back of the baseball card, no urgency, what urgency? I predicted that my emails would come. And if I also predicted that if I checked social media, I'm sure there was some response there about how ridiculous it was. And the Padres can't be talking like that. And anybody that doesn't demand wins like every night. And I felt it a little bit inside and I knew it was coming. When I say the eye test, this is a team that has scored at least 4 runs in 7 innings, 2-3 more than any team in the majors. They did not do that until their 76th game last year. Okay. That's a big deal because it shows you that it's a team that can string together hits, that can, get productive outs, that can, just force things to happen. They were not doing it last year. So that's a big deal. They have picked each other up. Okay, it's 2 comebacks, one in the 7th when they came to bat in the 7th, one when they trailed coming to bat in the 8th. Well, they only had 6 all last season, and it felt like, and players have acknowledged that it felt like if you're down by 1 after the 5th, like they weren't going to come back. And certainly if they were down multiple runs, it's and their 7th inning comeback, if I remember incorrectly, they lost the lead and went down by 2 in the top of the 7th, scored 2 didn't go down by 2. It was tied. They went down by 1. Sorry. And they scored 2 runs in the bottom of the 7th. Then, obviously, the people with short-term memory problems, probably like me, even remember that on Monday, they were down by 8 in the 7th, scored 7, or in the 6th, they scored 7, and then scored 2 more on Fernando Tatis Jr.'s home run in the 8th to win 9-8. That's just – it's not that we never saw something like that last year, but we never saw something like that last year.
I was just going to say that game Monday to me provided 2 things that we saw almost nothing of last year. Number one, a sort of touchstone moment for the season, right? The Fernando Tatis home run. And again, does this matter in terms of baseball standings? No, but it was a moment that, last year didn't have a whole lot of moments.
That's a moment.
A moment, the Don Orsillo call, that thing was the story in sports that night and early the next morning. 1. 2, it was a 1-run victory, right? Padres, who were so bad in 1-run games a year ago, managed to not only do what they did, but to then get that 1-run victory. To me, Kevin, when I'm comparing this year's team to last year's team, and it almost doesn't compute because I think last year's team was on paper much better. Mm-hmm. They had Juan Soto. We can start there. When I compare this year's team to last year's team, there is I don't want to say effort level because that's not what I'm trying to say. But to me, there is a fight that you see and Mike Shildt talks about, and it's happened now a couple of different times with this team. You can even look at Wednesday afternoon's game where, Ha-Seong Kim kicks another ball. The Padres are tied 2-2. They then rally again in the bottom half of that same inning. It was the 4th, I think. You're seeing some fight. You're seeing some pushback early on in the season. And, again, the record doesn't necessarily reflect it, but I think that these are traits that serve you well over the course of 6 months.
You absolutely. I think moments can mean something. You're right. Don't mean anything really, but they can, and especially if the players believe it. Talk about the fight. I didn't include it in the story, but that's the number one thing that players talk about. And when they talk about it, they're implying they didn't have it a little bit last year, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And people have said they don't have it in past stories. I want to point out, like, just so you know, it's not just words and they're not like just trying to like fit into my story, or I'm not trying to fit their quotes or fit stats or whatever into my story. It speaks to me. It spoke to me. And I'm not like I was surprised because I've been dealing with this guy now every day for, a couple months. But walking out of the media room toward the clubhouse after Monday's comeback, I was walking with Mike Schilt, and I said, kind of validates what what you've been preaching. And he goes, it's all been validation. And then he went on to talk about things that happened in losses, little tiny things, okay? Moving runners over, heads up running plays, being able to overcome different things that happened. So the victory, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but he talked about basically the point being that oftentimes people only focus on the dramatic. The victory didn't matter to him in the big picture that night. And that's what they're saying. Now, I just will say this. There have been plenty of times this year I've gone to myself or said to Jeff Sanders sitting next to me if it's a home game, here we go again, because there are things reminiscent of last year. That's and Stoics will understand this. You don't look at anything in life that isn't through some sort of shaded glasses of your previous experiences. And all of us are looking at this year through the experience of last year. And that's why you remember. You remember the one-run loss. You remember when I've got my stats here. There have been a number of games that they've gone 4 or 5 innings at the end without scoring. And you go, just like last year. Yeah, the Dodgers did that sometimes last year too.
Right.
So did the Braves.
Right. Well, you'd argue too, Monday night they have this great win. They're the story of baseball. Tuesday night they come back out, and it's exactly like innings 1 through 5 Monday night, right?
And our friend who doesn't believe in momentum, and anybody who used to listen to this podcast or follows him on Twitter know who I'm talking about, was all over me that night about the momentum.
Right. But, and it's just funny, and baseball is interesting, right? If you can look at this year's season through a number of different lenses, and kind of depending on when you want to sort of start the stat keeping and end the stat keeping, you can argue that this has been a good year, a terrible year, or something in between.
I love baseball that way. Arbitrary stats. Love them.
Arbitrary stats. You can make stats say whatever you want. What I think is interesting is when you have these players who are offering that this is different, or at least implying by saying that this is different than most years, they mean last year, right? To me, when that's being offered, and when you're starting to see some of that fight, when you're starting to see, Fernando Tatis doing superhuman things, we've seen that now twice. I think, that near play in right field that we talked about on our last episode, and then the go-ahead home run there, you are getting a feel that maybe this isn't like it was last year, where it was Groundhog Day for a while,
Right. And then throw in, so 2021, you want to talk about a season of moments, right? The first 3 months.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Didn't have the pitching depth. A team that was largely dependent on their stars performing. Well, this team's sort of dependent on their stars performing, but also has some other things, like Luis Campusano has 2 RBIs on groundouts this year. Now it's early, but 2, that's a lot in whatever is 13 games or whatever he's started, 12 games. Jackson Merrill has important walks that he has gotten, a rookie, right? And so they're much more situational this year. So I think that if you have moments along with playing baseball the right way, along with pitching depth, that's when you can have a very good team. And that's all we're saying here is that, maybe this is different.
One thing that the Padres didn't get last year, I don't think, was a lot of production out of their sort of cheap veteran, take a flyer on a guy file, right? Nelson Cruz was hot a little bit to start the year, but then really fell off a cliff. Matt Carpenter, went whole months without playing. Kevin, you can make the argument that here in the last week or so, Jurickson Profar has been one of the Padres' handful of best players.
Absolutely.
He's hitting 333, has an OPS of over 1,000. He won them Wednesday's game.
Been their MVP.
Talk about him. Yep. Yeah. Talk about him.
And it's a small sample size. I'm writing about it today that he's exhibit A in a new approach by the Padres, and aggressiveness. Don't want to get too deep into it here, but I've been deep into it for the last few hours. Right. And he's a winning player. For $1 million, there's a whole bunch of playing time incentives that it appears that he would reach and could make $2.5 million total. This is the kind of flyer that you take because $1 million is nothing. You know what I'm saying, Ryan? $1 million is nothing.
Yeah.
But it's also where they're like, we think that Jurickson Profar, who is comfortable here, is going to start off well. Did they think it was going to be whatever it is, 333, 434, 578 off the top of my head? For those of you not watching live and don't know that that's at the bottom of the screen, yes, my memory is coming back. But they thought, you know what, this guy played winter ball all year, didn't have a spring training last year before signing with the Rockies, got one this year, loves this team, loves this town. They thought, you know what, we think he'll be good at the start. If he can be anywhere near that, anywhere near like what he's kind of been in his career before last year, or what he was the first, I should say more like those 3 years he was here, 20 to 22. That's an incredible pickup, right? Like that's a really good pickup. And if he's not, well, then it was $1 million. And then you go, well, why did they waste that $1 million and not sign Tommy Pham? Okay. Yeah, absolutely. But this is the route they've taken, and they could not have gotten more out of Jurickson Profar so far.
Is there any concern, Kevin, because his offseason was spent playing so much baseball? Is there any concern that as the season goes on, they may need to get help there in left field?
They may end up needing to platoon him. Look, he's been replaced defensively for the final 2 innings, like 8 games. He is a baseball player. He's 31. That's something that can go either way, right? But he plays baseball. He also didn't sign until late, so he got a good two weeks off or so. And he said during spring that was really good for him. That is absolutely a possibility. Just like the batting average, the numbers are no longer at the bottom of the screen, and I can just recite them. But
333,
that'll have to remain to be seen.
Yeah. It's interesting. Kevin, in a world, by the way, where $1 million is nothing and 31 is old. Welcome to baseball. Padres head to LA. Again, it's so funny. I had to be corrected by that same person who we mentioned earlier, by the way.
Oh.
I saw him yesterday, and we were talking about the Padres. I said, well, they just haven't played the Dodgers yet. That's what makes me nervous. Sure they did twice in Korea. I went, oh. Yeah, of course they did. The Padres and the Dodgers, last time they met, they were in Seoul, South Korea, in a new continent, in a strange stadium, in a dome, with the Ohtani stuff swirling, and they split a series. They now head to LA, where it's probably going to be a little bit tougher to compete with the Dodgers. So what are we looking at here the next few days?
Well, first off, looking at Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who is the guy that they jumped on for 5 hits, 5 runs? No, what was it? 4 hits, 5 runs in the first inning, his only inning against them in his Dodgers debut. Well, since he's come back to the United States, he is not allowed to run in 2 starts. It appeared he was tipping pitches to some extent, and so got that fixed, and is, I guess we'll see if he's the $320 million man, but it appears that, pretty darn good pitcher. Yeah. So Michael King, who threw 7 shutout, was that Saturday? Yes, Saturday in San Francisco. He's making his next start tonight. So it's King, Yamamoto. Tomorrow, Matt Waldron and Gavin Stone. And on Sunday, Yu Darvish and James Paxton. The Dodgers, let's see here. They've got Betts and Freeman are 1-2 in Major League Baseball in total bases. Betts leads the NL with home runs. Oh, by the way, number 4 in total bases, Teoscar Hernandez. And then, Freddie Freeman isn't up by the leaders. All he's doing is basically like hitting like he normally does. 333 average, 400 OPS, or a 400 on base percentage, something like that. They got 3 former MVPs in their lineup. it's just remarkable how good they are. That said, I think it was that when they came home, they won 6 of 7 on that opening homestand, and I believe they split their last road trip, losing 2 of 3 in Chicago and taking 2 of 3 in Minnesota.
Right. That's baseball, right? Yeah, it's almost unfair, Kevin. You look at this lineup up and down. When Freddie Freeman isn't the first name out of your mouth, that's a pretty good team, because Freddie Freeman's about as good as they get in Major League Baseball. Again, some sobering Yamamoto stats here. Since getting shelled by the Padres in South Korea, he has pitched 10 innings. He has 13 strikeouts, 2 walks, no runs. Very good. Kevin, this is a strange, we haven't really talked about this yet. But again, there's more news coming out today on the Ohtani front. All the strange things going on with this translator. I'm not going to ask you to answer LA Dodger related questions. But do you anticipate this being a sideshow as the season goes on?
I think they have enough of a sideshow. Like obviously this could have been a lot worse. And by, just like I wasn't jumping to conclusions when there were more questions out there, these questions that have been at least answered by in a legal sense, but by the federal prosecutor. I don't have much opinion on it there, because, there's a whole lot that maybe we don't know, or maybe now we do know everything, but this could have been worse for them, obviously. Yeah. However, the guy is a sideshow unto himself. They're just bringing so much international media, so much domestic media. The Dodgers, are a big time team anyway. It is. I don't know that it can get much bigger than the Dodgers right now.
It seems to me, Kevin, on a Friday night at Dodger Stadium with Ohtani in the lineup and Yamamoto on the mound, I mean, this is the center of the baseball world tonight, don't you think?
When you say world, yes.
Like the world, the literal
Saturday
world.
morning in Japan, yes.
Yeah,
it's the world.
That's
what we got to remember, is the world. These guys are huge.
Yes. And speaking of the world in the Padres own international guys, Kevin, again, another error the other day from Ha-Seong Kim. This is a guy who struggled a little bit in the Giants series. You could have said it led to a loss there. What was it, Sunday?
It did.
Yeah, he's somebody, and we don't talk about this enough, I don't think. When I read quotes and things that he says, obviously this is coming through a translator and it's not his native language. What is he just like in those situations? And give our listeners and your readers some insight here as to just kind of Ha-Seong Kim, the person.
Fairly stoic. And I think that's something that, is cultural, as well as when you're going through a translator too. There's just not a lot of nuance, or, you can't read into much. I certainly can't read into much. But because we're not getting every single word, right? We always got to remember that, which is why I think, first off, you have to say it's through an interpreter. By the way, when I don't say it's through an interpreter on Yu Darvish, that means Yu Darvish, who speaks perfect English. I was just talking to him alone. But Ha-Seong probably speaks better Spanish than he does English, because his closest friends on the team are, speak Spanish. And just there's an abruptness to the way that he speaks. Again, the language, it's very difficult to read into much, which is why I say he's stoic. There was no doubt that he felt terrible. Watch his body language for a little bit, both nights, or I guess it was Wednesday afternoon and Sunday afternoon. He feels terrible. This guy, I mean, you can't say like that. Not that anyone is that I know of. You can't say both that this guy plays so hard, which is why I believe he's one of the more popular, if not like the most purely popular Padres player. And then say, well, based on his quotes, that there wasn't any, that he didn't feel sufficiently sorry. It's not. It's just, you know what? As he showed by being also one of the heroes of Wednesday's game, after booting a ball that led to a 2-run homer. By the way, he's led to 5 unearned runs in the last 5 games. But he's one of my favorite Padres.
It's so funny when we talk about, again, translators and quotes and things. When I read quotes from him, I mean, to me, it seems sort of like raw emotion, right? I don't find that there's a lot of
not the feedback I had gotten, but
right.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just, it's so interesting. And again, Kevin, you're in a clubhouse where, many different languages are spoken, right? And there is room for nuance and interpretation on a lot of this stuff. I don't envy you some days, if Fernando Tatis misuses a word in a quote, what he's trying to say, right? If Ha-Seong Kim misuses a word in a translation, maybe not so much.
Right. Look, I am careful. You know how many times Fernando Tatis Jr., I think he speaks the language beautifully, right? Because there's this mix, right? But there are times I don't quote Fernando Tatis Jr. because I believe it will be misinterpreted. Mm-hmm. And I would rather err on that side of caution. Right. Okay, I just would. Or I'm not entirely sure what he was saying, and I think that when it comes across in print, it's going to say something else to people, and I'm not going to do that. You just have to be careful, even when someone is speaking your language, but it's not their native language. By the way, you mentioned the number of languages. The other day, I was talking to Xander Bogaerts, and Jurickson Profar came by, and one from Curacao. Why? That's the hard one. Why can't I remember where Xander's from? Aruba. And they were speaking Dutch to each other. So there's a lot of languages in this. I think it was Dutch. It was one of the languages that, both of those countries are under the purview of the Netherlands. So, sure. But it certainly was not Spanish and it was not English. And I don't think either one of them speak much Korean. So Profar might have picked up a couple of the words. He's very close with Ha-Seong Kim.
Yeah, that's very cool. Kevin, I always put you on the spot at the end here, and today is no different. Give me an LA driving tip. You got to go to Dodger Stadium today. What's your secret?
Go early, leave late. I mean, what a disaster this place is. And I lived here for 5 years, and I loved it. I did. I loved it. Where we lived was, loved the area. And then
LA metro area there. I mean,
in LA, have to go out and about,
right?
You just understand that 10 miles might take you an hour. It's what it is, right? You're an idiot if you don't. Mm-hmm. Well, then come back though, and now I'm practically homicidal. I missed the turn yesterday and acted like an idiot in my own car, not to anyone else, just to my own car. I was just so angry for about 10 seconds. I'm like, but you miss a turn in LA and you're talking about 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. So, well, the tip is there's no tip, because if you don't want to be in traffic, you don't want to be risking your fender, go early, stay late. You've never seen anything unless you've been here, the egress at Dodger Stadium in the ninth inning. Now, it doesn't happen as much anymore. Back when I covered the Dodgers, maybe if they were losing in the seventh, it doesn't happen as much anymore. But the egress of brake lights, it's a sea of red that you can see from the press box as people are leaving.
Which Dodgers team did you cover?
97, last year of the O'Malley ownership.
Okay.
It was a family. It was a wonderful, wonderful team to cover.
Wow. Who managed? Was that
Bill Russell? Was the manager,
yeah.
And that's as old school as you get. And Reggie Smith was the first base coach. Joey Amalfitano was the third base coach. Fred Clare was the general manager. It was Mike Piazza, Eric Karros, Hideo Nomo, Chun-Ho Park, Todd Holland, Billy Ashley, Greg Gagne, Ramon Martinez. It was just a lot of fun.
Wow.
And the O'Malley ownership was it was family. It was really good. That was Vero Beach, Dodger Town. Lasorda's first year of not being manager. He was around constantly. I just waxed poetic about the Dodgers, which I'm sure is very popular. Again, remember that I said I hate LA.
No good Tommy Lasorda stories?
Not that I can tell.
There we go. That's fantastic. Man, see, that must have been cool for you, though. Young guy, being 26. On the field. You were 26 and covering the LA Dodgers.
Yep.
Look at you, man.
There was a long time where I was as young or younger than the people I covered. It was when I was on the Chargers, and I barely barely older than Lorenzo Neal is who I think it was that I go, tipping point right here, tipping point.
But you could take Lorenzo Neal, right? 4-time
Oh.
CIF wrestling champion Lorenzo Neal.
Oh. No. As if anyone was going to take that seriously. Lorenzo's a big teddy bear, though. Man, that's a good guy.
One of the great all-time California athletes. People don't know this, but again,
he was because he was a
great
fullback,
wrestler.
right? But like
Right.
just crazy athletic.
Yep. I mean, again, you can make the argument one of the greatest wrestlers the state's ever produced.
Wow.
Yeah, how about that? That'll do it for this episode of the Hot Lava Podcast. Kevin, thank you for getting silly with me at the end there. That was fun. For Kevin Acee, I'm Ryan Finley. We'll see you next time.